My name is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. The trial began. The government pleader, the magistrate, and other officials were on the tenterhooks. They were at a loss to know what to do. The government pleader was pressing the magistrate to postpone the case, but I interfered and requested the magistrate not to postpone the case, as I wanted to plead guilty to having disobeyed the order to leave Champaran, and read a brief statement as follows. With the permission of the court, I would like to make a brief statement showing why I have taken the very serious step of seemingly disobeying the order passed under Section 144 of CRPC. In my humble opinion, it is a question of difference of opinion between the local administration and myself. I have entered the country with motives of rendering humanitarian and national service. I have done so in response to a pressing invitation to come and help the riots who urge they are not being fairly treated by the indigo planters. I could not render any help without studying the problem. I have therefore come to study it with the assistance, if possible, of the administration and the planters. I have no other motive and cannot believe that my coming can in any way disturb public peace and cause loss of life. I claim to have considerable experience in such matters. The administration, however, have thought differently. I fully appreciate their difficulty, and I admit too that they can only proceed upon information they received. As a law-abiding citizen, my first instinct would be, as it were, to obey the order served upon me. But I could not do so without doing violence to my sense of duty to those for whom I have come. I feel that I could just now serve them only by remaining in their midst. I could not therefore voluntarily retire. Amid this conflict of duties, I could only throw the responsibility of removing me from them on the administration. I am fully conscious of the fact that a person holding in the public life of India a position such as I do has to be most careful in setting an example. It is my firm belief that in the complex constitution under which we are living, the only safe and honorable course for a self-respecting man is, in the circumstances such as face me, to do what I have decided to do, that is, to submit without protest to the penalty of disobedience. I venture to make this statement not in any way in extenuation of the penalty to be awarded against me, but to show that I have disregarded the order served upon me, not for want of respect for lawful authority, but in obedience to the higher law of our being, the voice of conscience. There was now no occasion to postpone the hearing, but as both the magistrate and the government pleader had been taken by surprise, the magistrate postponed judgment. Meanwhile, I had wired full details to the Viceroy, to Patna friends, as also to Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya and others. Before I could appear before the court to receive the sentence, the magistrate sent a written message that the Lieutenant Governor has ordered the case against me to be withdrawn, and the collector wrote to me saying that I was at liberty to conduct the proposed inquiry and that I might count on whatever help I needed from the officials. None of us was prepared for this prompt and happy issue. I called on the collector, Mr. Hayhawk. He seemed to be a good man, anxious to do justice. He told me that I might ask for whatever papers I desired to see, and that I was at liberty to see him whenever I liked. The country thus had its first direct object, lesson in civil disobedience. The affair was freely discussed both locally and in the press, and my inquiry got unexpected publicity. It was necessary for my inquiry that the government should remain neutral, but the inquiry did not need support from press reporters or leading articles in the press. So I wrote to the editors of the principal papers requesting them not to trouble to send any reporters, as I should send them whatever might be necessary for publication and keep them informed. Statement to the press. The proceedings are withdrawn under instructions from government. Official assistance during the conduct of my inquiry has been promised, and I feel grateful to the government for the withdrawal of the proceedings and promised assistance. I am being splendidly helped by local pleaders and others, and messages of sympathy and promise of help have been received from many quarters, which encourage my fellow workers and myself. During my stay here, I have already visited some villages and seen hundreds of riots. The officials have shown every courtesy throughout. While I am carrying on this inquiry, no public agitation is necessary. The issues involved are tremendously great. I hope to place my final conclusions before government and the country. I knew that the government attitude countenancing my presence has displeased the Champaran planters, and I know that even the officials, though they could say nothing openly, had hardly have liked it. For misleading reports, therefore, were likely to intense them all the more, and their ire, instead of descending on me, would be sure to descend on the poor, fear-stricken riots and seriously hinder my search for the truth about the case. In spite of these precautions, the planters engineered against me a poisonous agitation. All sorts of falsehoods appeared in the press about my co-workers and myself, but my extreme cautiousness and insistence on truth, even to the minute's detail, turned the edge of their sword. The planters left no stone unturned in maligning Braj Kishore Babu, but the more they maligned him, the more he rose in the estimation of the people. In such a delicate situation as this, I did not think it proper to invite any leaders from other provinces. Pandit Malviyaji had sent me an assurance that whenever I wanted him, I had only to send him a word, but I did not trouble him. I thus prevented the struggle from assuming a political aspect. But I sent to the leaders and the principal papers occasional reports, not for the publication, but merely for their information. I had seen that even where the end might be political, but where the cause was non-political, one damaged it by giving it a political aspect and helped it by keeping it within its non-political limit. The Champaran struggle was a proof of the fact that disinterested service of the people in any sphere ultimately helps the country politically. The inquiry could not be conducted in Gorakh Babu's house without practically asking poor Gorakh Babu to vacate it, and the people of Motihari had not yet shed their fear to the extent of renting a house to us. However, Braj Kishore Babu tactfully secured one with considerable open space about it, and we now removed there. It was not quite possible to carry on the work without money. It had not been the practice hitherto to appeal to the public for money for work of this kind. Braj Kishore Babu and his friends were mainly vakils who either contributed funds themselves or found it from friends whenever there was an occasion. How could they ask the money to pay when they and their kind could well afford to do so? That seemed to be the argument. I had made up my mind not to accept anything from the Champaran riots. It would be bound to be misinterpreted. I was equally determined not to appeal to the country at large for funds to conduct this inquiry, for that was likely to give it an all India and political aspect. Friends from Bombay offered rupees 15,000, but I declined the offer with thanks. I decided to get as much as was possible with Braj Kishore Babu's help from well-to-do Biharis living outside Champaran, and if more was needed, to approach my friend Dr. P.J. Mehta of Rangoon. Dr. Mehta readily agreed to send me whatever might be needed. We were thus free from all anxiety of this score. We were not likely to require large funds, as we were bent on exercising the greatest economy in consonance with the poverty of Champaran. Indeed, it was found in the end that we did not need any large amount. I have an impression that we expended in all not more than 3,000 rupees, and as far as I remember, we saved a few thousand rupees from what we have collected. The curious ways of living of my companions in the early days were a constant theme of raillery at their expense. Each of the vakils had a servant and a cook and therefore a separate kitchen, and they often had their dinner as late as midnight. Though they paid their own expenses, their irregularity worried me. But as we had become close friends, there was no possibility of a misunderstanding between us, and they received my ridicule in a good part. Ultimately, it was agreed that the servants should be dispensed with, that all the kitchens should be amalgamated, and that regular hours should be observed. As all were not vegetarians, and as 2 kitchens would have been expensive, a common vegetarian kitchen was decided upon. It was also felt necessary to insist on simple meals. These arrangements considerably reduced the expenses and saved us a lot of time and energy, and both these were badly needed. Crowds of peasants came to make their statements, and they were followed by an army of companions who filled the compound and garden to overflowing. The efforts of my companions to save me from darshan seekers were often of no avail, and I had to be exhibited for darshan at particular hours. At least 5 to 7 volunteers were required to take down statements, and even then people had to go away in the evening without being able to make their statements. All these statements were not essential, many of them being repetition, but people could not be satisfied otherwise, and I appreciated their feelings in the matter. Those who took down the statements had to observe certain rules. Each peasant had to be closely cross-examined, and whoever failed to satisfy the test was rejected. This entailed a lot of extra time, but most of the statements were thus rendered incontrovertible. An officer from the CID would always be present when the statements were recorded. We might have prevented him, but we had decided from the very beginning not only to mind the presence of the CID officers, but to treat them with courtesy and to give them all the information that it was possible to give them. This was far from doing any harm. On the contrary, the very fact that the statements were taken down in the presence of the CID officers made the peasants more fearless. Whilst, on the one hand, excessive fear of the CID was driven out of the peasants' mind, on the other, their presence exercised a natural restraint on exaggeration. It was the business of CID friends to entrap people, and so the peasants had necessarily to be cautious. As I did not want to irritate the planters, but to win them over by gentleness, I made a point of writing to and meeting such of them, against whom allegations of a serious nature were made. I met the Planters Association as well, placed the riots' grievances before them, and acquainted myself with their point of view. Some of the planters hated me, some were indifferent, while some treated me with courtesy. Braj Kishore Babu and Rajendra Babu were a matchless pair. Their devotion made it impossible for me to take a single step without their help. Their disciples or their companions, Shambhu Babu, Anugrah Babu, Dharani Babu, Ramnavami Babu, and other vakils were always with us. Vindhya Babu and Janakdhari Babu also came and helped us now and then. All these were Biharis. Their principal work was to take down the riots' statements. Professor Kripalani could not but cast in his lot with us. Though a Sindhi, he was more Bihari than a born Bihari. I have seen only a few workers capable of merging themselves in the province of their adoption. Kripalani is one of those few. He made it impossible for anyone to feel that he belonged to a different province. He was my gatekeeper in chief. For the time being, he made it the end and aim of his life to save me from Darshan seekers. He warded off people, calling to his aid now his unfailing humor, now his non-violent threats. At nightfall, he would take up his occupation of a teacher and regale his companions with his historical studies and observations and quicken any timid visitor into bravery. Maulana Mazharul Haq had registered his name on the standing list of helpers whom I might count upon whenever necessary, and he made a point of looking in once or twice a month. The pomp and splendor in which he then lived was a sharp contrast to his simple life of today. The way in which he associated with us made us feel that he was one of us, though his fashionable habit gave a stranger a different impression. As I gained more experience of Bihar, I became convicted that work of a permanent nature was impossible without proper village education. The ryots' ignorance was pathetic. They either allowed their children to roam about or made them toil on indigo plantation from morning to night for a couple of coppers a day. In those days, a male laborer's wage did not exceed 10 pies, a female did not exceed 6, and a child's 3. He who succeeded in earning 4 annas a day was considered most fortunate. In consultation with my companions, I decided to open primary schools in 6 villages. One of our conditions with the villagers was that they should provide the teachers with board and lodgings while we would see the other expenses. The village folk had hardly any cash in their hands, but they could well afford to provide foodstuffs. Indeed, they had already expressed their readiness to contribute grain and other raw materials. From where to get the teachers was a great problem. It was difficult to find local teachers who would work for a bare allowance or without remuneration. My idea was never to entrust children to commonplace teachers. Their literacy qualification was not so essential as their moral fiber. So, I issued a public appeal for voluntary teachers. It received a ready response. Gangadhar Rao Deshpande sent Baba Sahib Soman and Pundalik. Srimati Avantika Bai Gokhale came from Bombay and Mrs. Anandi Bai from Pune. I sent to the ashram of Chota Lal, Sundarnath and my son Devdas. About this time, Mahadev Desai and Narahari Parekh with their wives cast in their lot with me. Kasturbai was also summoned for the work. This was a fairly strong contingent. Srimati Avantika Bai and Srimati Anandi Bai were educated enough, but Srimati Durga Desai and Srimati Maniben Parekh had nothing more than a bare knowledge of Gujarati, and Kasturbai not even that. How were these ladies to instruct the children in Hindi? I explained to them that they were expected to teach the children not grammar, and the 3 R's so much as cleanliness and good manners. I further explained that even as regards letters, there were not so great a difference between Gujarati, Hindi and Marathi as they imagined, and in the primary classes, at any rate, the teaching of the rudiments of the alphabet and numerals was not a difficult matter. The result was that the classes taken by these ladies were found to be the most successful. The experience inspired them with confidence and interest in their work. Avantika Bai's become a model school. She threw herself heart and soul into her work. She brought her exceptional gifts to bear on it. Through these ladies, we could, to some extent, reach the village women. But I did not want to stop at providing for primary education. The villages were insanitary, the lanes full of filth, the wells surrounded by mud and stink, and the courtyards unbearably untidy. The elder people badly needed education in cleanliness. They were all suffering from various skin diseases. So, it was decided to do as much sanitary work as possible and to penetrate every department of their lives. Doctors were needed for this work. I requested the servants of India Society to lend us the services of the late Dr. Dev. We had been great friends, and he readily offered his services for 6 months. The teachers, men and women, had all to work under him. All of them had expressed instructions not to concern themselves with grievances against planters or with politics. People who had any complaints to make were to be referred to me. No one was to venture out of his beat. The friends carried out these instructions with wonderful fidelity. I do not remember a single occasion of indiscipline.